You're listening to Head Voice, bringing you inside the minds of singers and sound creators who are redefining what it means to make music with a voice. I'm Evan, and this week we are fortunate to be joined by Mr. Johnny DelToro, aka JDT, aka J5. He is an arranger and producer who contracts for the vocal company. He is currently, at the time of this recording, based in upstate New York. He's a super talented dude, and we talked about a lot of stuff from his humble beginnings in music to how he kind of fell into being a music major to conveying emotions and using motifs and themes and arranging and lots of fun stuff. We talk about a lot of things, so I've notated when each question is asked in the episode if you want to skip around, if you're just interested in specific subjects. Two quick things before we get into it. Los Angeles Acapella Festival next weekend. We're going to be there. We're doing a panel. We hope to see you there. If you're not going to be there, we're recording it, so you'll be there in spirit. And then secondly, we are still holding our ongoing giveaway of a personal sketch for you by Kayla and some new stickers that we just got. So all you have to do is leave a review on iTunes. We see some people have left ratings, which is the amount of stars, and we super appreciate that. But to win, you just have to leave a short review. Just be like, it's good, it's bad. I don't know. Do whatever you want. And that is certainly enough of me, so I hope you enjoyed this episode with Mr. J5, Johnny DelToro.
Oh, you can't judge. You can't judge.
So
You gotta just go in.
Exactly. Hello, we're here with Johnny DelToro, and we're super stoked to have him on Head Voice today.
I'm super stoked to be on Head Voice today.
Yay! So we're gonna just start off by going back to the beginnings, and if you wouldn't mind just kind of talking about where you were born and raised.
Of course. Where I was born and raised. I was born in Fairfax, Virginia.
Ooh.
In terms of where I was raised, I'd say 90% of my raising happened in Pennsylvania, around a couple of parts, like central Pennsylvania, and then a little bit in a place called Dauphin County.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What was your musical upbringing like?
My musical upbringing. So the biggest thing is that both of my parents were musical. My mom played guitar and piano. She played a little organ when she was growing up. My dad was a drummer, and they both had very religious backgrounds. So they played in worship bands and things like that. When they were in New Jersey, New York. A lot of my family has strong ties to Puerto Rico. So lots of Hispanic culture in there, and in a lot of Hispanic circles, if you don't play an instrument, you're kind of looked at as the weirdo. So, so yeah. So
what
both of them
instrument came first?
for me. I believe so. From technically piano. Technically, I started playing piano, and then I went. I got like a lesson, and then chickened out because I was much too young to know the value of such things. But continued to listen to music and love music. And after a while, I think I was 9 when I picked up the guitar, and that became kind of my main instrument. So.
And then in terms of like education-wise and like middle school, high school, and whatnot, was music still like a part of your life in that way too? So
yes. Okay, so singing was kind of interspersed in the middle of everything. My mom loved singing, and when I was around 4 years old, I got really, really attached to the idea of harmony with her. And so when we used to sing together, for the longest time, I had no idea what a melody was, because all she taught me was thirds above the melody, fifths above the melody, whatever. And so I grew up from like 5 to basically when my voice dropped, I was singing harmony, and the only reason that I started singing melody is because my voice dropped and I can no longer be a boy soprano. So yeah, that was me. So singing was a really, really big part of that. And then I got to elementary school, continued singing. Nothing professionally, obviously, nothing crazy, just because I loved it, and singing along to the country music I heard on the radio when I was living in Dauphin County. Got really attached to Faith Hill and all that stuff. Martina McBride, wow. And then when I went to middle school, I started taking an interest in guitar. That's the 9 to 12 range. That's when I started playing that. I started playing a little Dust in the Wind and started to pick up some picking techniques. Yeah. Had some friends that were taking classical guitar. They taught me a little bit of that. My mom taught me a little bit of piano. Right. Yeah, actually. Yeah, exactly. So that continued through middle school, guitar and piano. And then at some point I begged my parents to get a drum set because I was really attached to that idea, and I started to play the drums. Bass was kind of interspersed in there because if you play the guitar, you can play the bass, and so whatever was needed. My family kind of created a little band that we played. You know, we didn't like perform a whole lot, but we played for ourselves and we rehearsed a lot, and we, whatever. So we got together. My brother played drums. My dad sang and played the guitar. My mom sang and played the piano. I played lead guitar, and we just had a ball.
That's so awesome. I'm very jealous of that.
It was a great time. Yeah, it was one of the many blessings that I had growing up, was that everyone in my family was very supportive of music and very, very talented. So we all kind of played off each other and learned really early on those group dynamics that make just, singing in collaboration and performing in collaboration really easy. If you get it in your bones. So that was big all through high school. And then when I was in high school, I started writing songs and writing music. And this whole time, I guess I should probably say I became obsessed with film and movie music and, all the classics. And so, that's partly where my journey began into the professional world. It was because I wanted to be a film composer. Was
there no question when you were applying to colleges that that's what you wanted to study?
So that's a great question, because there absolutely was. There absolutely was. And I find this to be a common thread among a lot of music professionals, actually, is that we didn't all know what we wanted to do.
Right.
My hero in film composition is a guy named Thomas Newman, who's a fantastic film composer, has been nominated for awards for basically every single year. He gets 2 or 3 nominations for awards. And he, you basically, his music, you know what I mean? It's like one of those things where his music, you just don't know his name.
Right.
And he's the same exact way. I just watched an interview with this guy talking about how he just got into film composing because he didn't know what else to do. He didn't plan to do it. He just didn't know what else to do. For me, it was a little bit different. But I initially started in school because I thought I was going to be in computer science.
Ooh.
So I started, my first 2 years were in computer science in college. And then in my second year, it was a fairly dramatic and funny switch to music, partly because I was horrible at computer science and partly because I was just better at music, and I wanted,
good at computer science.
Yes, I can attest to this. There are some people, and I can tell you, because that's how I found out I was bad at computer science, is because I was in lab with people that were getting done with their stuff in like an hour, and I was there 4 hours, 5 hours later, still trying to figure out stuff. So it kind of became a running joke in my comp sci class, and that's not why I left, but that's just a little bit of why I left. Right.
And you wrote this whole album that was...
I did write some computer science oriented songs, and I am ashamed to say. Yeah. So, but once I hit my second semester at college, I went to Bucknell. They allow you to go 2, not semesters, years. So they allow you to go 2 years, not knowing what your major is. It's a liberal arts college. That's something I really appreciated about that particular university.
Yeah.
And it's partly why I picked it, is because I didn't really know. I knew I wanted to be in something involving, computers, something like electronic oriented. I really wanted to work with my hands. But at the same time, I had these other talents that I knew that I could potentially take advantage of. So, I wanted something that was going to allow me to have that flexibility. And it turned out that this place was it, just the right combination of people that I met at the time that were okay with me making that sort of a switch, and just the right friends that I had met at the time that forced me to make the switch when they knew better than I knew better for myself. So,
yeah. So how did a cappella sort of fit in this time frame and just like the shift that you were kind of going through during college?
Well, to be honest, a cappella is the reason that I made the switch. It was that's also a common thread that I think I'm seeing a lot more of from the more people in the world of collegiate a cappella that I talk to, the more I realize like it's changing people's lives a little bit. But yeah, no, so I was in computer science, and then I was doing fine. And then I met a guy who would later become my best friend named Sean Fortney, who he had just gotten drafted into this a cappella group, 2 Past Midnight, on Bucknell's campus. And he was the beatboxer, kind of a obnoxious, really smart, really pushy, but really smart and really kind guy. And so we got to talking, and eventually I did a couple of arrangements just because, and I threw them their way to see if they would, want to perform them. And it turns out that they did. And as our friendship developed, so did my interest in arranging for this group when I wasn't even in it. And then eventually, the time, so it's a funny story. The night at that college where, when you reach the second semester of your second year, you have, as all colleges, I would assume, a deadline for which you have to apply to be a major of something, right? And so I'd reached this point and completely, again, chickened out because I didn't have I wasn't classically trained in any instrument. I had actually auditioned for other universities before and gotten rejected in the music department because I didn't have the training. I wasn't up to snuff. And so I hadn't practiced a piece. There was nothing. I was going to try to do it with piano. I didn't know my chops with the piano. You remember that one piano class that I had that I chickened out of? It all came back, right? It all came back. And I knew I loved arranging for a cappella, but, I don't think Bucknell University is a unique school in the sense that it doesn't really consider a cappella something to be admired in terms of the musical, academics. So I had nothing. I thought I had nothing. And so I wasn't going to do it. And so, but Sean, who had, at that point become kind of a mainstay in my life, he broke into my room, stole my keyboard, moved it into another building, stole a bunch of snacks, moved it into another building, and then kidnapped me after class and put me in that building in a basement where no one was, set up, and he literally stood. He did his work right next to me, and every time I tried to get up and leave, he had shoved me back down into my seat. And I learned a whole I learned a piece by Chopin that I then used the next day to audition. But we stayed up all night, me learning this piece, trying to memorize it. And he was like, "You're going to be a music major because this is what you're meant to do. Stop screwing around."
You owe everything to him.
Needless to say, this guy kind of stuck around in terms of my my friendship circles, and he's my dude, and for that reason.
If we were writing the movie of your life, I think that scene would get scrapped for being unrealistic. That seems
right. It struck me that way too. Yeah, and when someone's doing that, when someone's creating that sort of narrative for you, and you got to remember that I'm a kid that loves movies as well, so it's impossible for me to separate myself from this narrative at the moment. At the risk of sounding entirely narcissistic, it was magical. It was a time when someone really believed in me. They showed it, and they stuck with me. And the next morning, neither of us had slept, he drove me to the audition building. He dropped me off with coffee. He said, "Call me whenever you're a music major." And so I walked in, and this is hilarious. I walked in, I sat in front of the most, we'll say the harshest, the strictest piano teacher there, and started to play this piece, and about halfway through completely forgot everything, because you don't do that. You don't sit and learn a piece, in one night and expect yourself to remember. I wasn't even reading I didn't know how to read the sheet music. I wasn't reading the sheet. I was plunking out, all night trying to get into my fingers. And when I got to that point where I entirely forgot, I just kind of threw myself at his mercy. I was like, there's no way I'm going to remember this. I learned this last night. And weirdly enough, that's what impressed him. Wow. He sat back, he was like, you learned this last night, and then asked me about my motivations for wanting to be a music major. And I kind of laid it out for him. And there was another movie moment where there was complete silence in the room. And I fully expected him to be like, "This, you got to be joking. People do this for years." But instead, he picked up a piano practice book. He handed it to me, and he was like, "Don't make me regret this. You got to do this every day. Dang, you got a lot of catching up to do." And I said, "All right." So cool. That was the beginning. That is literally
a scene out of a movie. Yes. They should make a movie about your life.
Coming soon. Someone. What did you study specifically in music, or just was there a broad?
So it was a very broad, because I had joined up late. I couldn't really specify things down, and when I petitioned the school to do that, they were all no's, in terms of all the credits that I would need to acquire in order to, because I wanted to go into composition. That was my thing. I wanted to compose.
And then when did you get out to Sydney?
You are well informed. So that happened. That was senior year. I think it was. Shoot, I'm so horrible for not remembering this. It's either the last semester of junior year or the very first semester of senior year that I spent in Australia, because at that point I had progressed enough to audition for that conservatory and at least be not worth the rejection. So I went over there as I was finishing up my college experience and spent about 6 months there studying composition, studying production, making friends with the singers, because that's where it's at, the Opera House, in Sydney. And then making a couple of connections in the vocal world, because they have some kick butt vocal groups up there that are very like academic. They're a little bit, they're much more focused on repertoire, like classical repertoire and everything. But you want to talk about movie-like experiences. I could go on and on about, the experiences that I had in Sydney. I would highly recommend it to anybody that drums up the cash for that ridiculous plane ticket. And, because once you get there, minimum wage is something like $25 an hour. So you're good. But yeah. So anyway, yeah.
And then did you find your way to Tom Anderson post college? What was the first thing?
Yeah, let's continue the journey. So I came back. I feel like this whole thing's gonna be just like, this is not what people signed up to listen to. But no, look, so I got back to school, and this is, again, another testament to ridiculously giving people in my life. But my my friend group, basically, when I got back and I was getting ready to kind of move into the real world, I was expressing interest in video game composition and movie composition, sending my resume places. But when you're just coming out of college, that's not a thing. No one's going to care very much unless you're going for an internship position that is unpaid, which I could not do. So I had a bunch of friends, Sean being kind of a ringleader in that, who got together and created a Kickstarter for me without my knowledge. And got a bunch of my friends and family to donate so that I could be sent to the vocal company Next Level seminar.
Wow. You have some good family and friends.
Isn't it ridiculous? Yeah. This is not, I mean, I am resting in my laurels in terms of, the kinds of opportunities that I've had just because of, the people that I've been around and the love that people show. I mean, that's why I'm always interested in helping others where I can, because how could I not? I mean, having the story that I have. Anyway, so they got together. They supplied me with the money to go to this thing. I went to this seminar with Dave and Nick, and at that was a big seminar. That was one where James Cannon was at. James Gammon showed up. Some huge players, and then Tom Anderson was teaching the arranging portion of the seminar at that point. And he and I hit it off immediately, and he was extremely kind and said that he recognized potential in me and offered me a spot doing some contract work for him. But that's kind of where my life diverged from just kind of music and wanting to do the film and video game thing to straight a cappella for a while, see if I could kind of work on some of the talents that I had been working on in school, because I had done arrangements for other groups in school, and I had even done a couple of things professionally that had gone overseas, like in some elementary schools that their choirs had asked for arrangements and things like that, and I loved it. Cool. And the idea of doing that kind of full time and seeing if I could slug it out as a contract arranger was a really, really appealing thing for me. So thankfully, Tom saw the potential in me, and he was kind enough to give me an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
So I did for about 2 years, I think, a year and a half, 2 years. Me and Tom worked together. And then I moved to Boston. And then when I moved to Boston, I needed to do a lot of different things in order to make a paycheck, because Boston, as you know, has some fun rent prices.
Yep.
So,
very fun.
So living in Boston, just arranging wasn't enough to continue to pay the rent. And so anyway, I took a little break from that. And I worked in a dog kennel for about 6 months.
No way.
And I worked with animals, which made me love dogs very, very much, scars and all. And then I hooked up with a vocal company because I wanted to expand on what I could do as a producer, what I could do as a masterclass technician. I guess clinician is the better word. and then continue arranging. And that's what I did for about, I don't even want to give numbers because I'm bad at them. For some years, I did that.
Yeah.
And I'm still doing that. I'm still involved with contracting work for them.
Awesome.
And I'd love to stay as involved as I can for as long as I can.
And you will. It's fun. I don't know if I speak for other people. I know I speak for us too, but you're such an enigma, I feel like, to so many. So we've exposed your whole history, and it's out there in recorded form forever.
I can't imagine anyone's that interested, but that's great.
I think many people will be.
I'm happy.
Just to kind of backtrack for a second, earlier you mentioned how, like, when you were growing up, your mom sort of ingrained harmony in you, and that was something that you really loved. And I'm just curious if you could kind of speak to that a little bit more, and how that, if it did, make you more attracted to the idea of a cappella and just vocal music in general.
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, and the more I look back even now at the music pieces that I loved, you know, you have this impression when you think about music like that it was, here's the music that I loved, and then I found a cappella, right? But the truth is, if you actually start to look at any of one of those pieces and think of the actual moments that you were looking forward to in each song, so many of them had to do with a break in the music and having just vocals for a little bit. You know, a vocal break. You know, so many of the NSYNC songs, so many of the Backstreet Boys songs were generated off of this idea of vocal harmony, and specifically vocal harmony, because harmony is obviously everywhere in music, but to hear human voices connecting like that, you know, you can't talk to a single, you know, well-spoken a cappella individual, if we could be so crude as to use a term like that, you know, that it won't, you know, reference at least one point in their life experiencing a musical moment that clicks. So everyone describes this click moment where they get onto stage or they get in a room with people and they're singing harmonic lines and they reach a point where either the tuning is really good or everyone is in the same emotional space or everyone is feeling the same performative vibe or whatever the case may be. There's a unison of spirit that really kind of elevates everything to the next level. It certainly elevates everything inside you, right? And it's an individual experience in that it's affecting you, but you can look around the room and see it affecting everyone else, and then hopefully look into the audience and see it affecting them. You know, to me, it's not that that's not possible with other instruments. It's just that, you know, having played instrumental music, having played in other type of, you know, ensembles, I find those moments to be rare, you know, in comparison with a cappella. I don't know what it is, you know, and a more well-spoken person could probably pin that a little bit better than I could. But there's something special about the voice. There's something special about, you know, just the voice and multiple voices together. So when I was singing with my mother, I think that was my click moment. I think that I reached a point where I knew what in tune was, and I could see her closing her eyes and really experiencing a moment, and I could feel the rush of warmth that came to my face and to my heart, and it absolutely swallowed me up. So
obviously, like, that for you is something that kind of woke you up to the idea that, you know, the synergy, harmony can like lead to some amount of happiness and joy. When did you kind of realize that other emotions are also just as linked to the voice, or just as possible with the voice?
There are a couple of really standout moments for me. The first is when I decided that I was going to pursue music, not necessarily professionally, but definitely like as more of a not just a hobby. And it's when I was actually sitting around in college doing my physics homework. I was listening to music from film, and I think I was listening to Cinderella Man, and the score for that is by Thomas Newman, the dude that I would later look up to as sort of a role model. And I kept on playing this song over and over again because I was banging my head against a physics problem. And I don't know if you guys have taken physics, but there's a lot of that for me. And banging your head against a problem. So I was doing that, and I was in kind of a place of emotional turmoil, and simply the music was calming that. It was sort of like a salve, you know? Is that how you pronounce that word, salve? Right, a salve.
We'll say that it. That's
salve. Yeah. Okay. So it was calming me. Okay. It was like is antithesis to my stress. And at some point, I think on the 5th or 6th replay of the song, I sat back and went, why am I doing physics homework when I could be doing this for somebody else, when I could be creating music that would act as a balm of like calm and peace, you know? When you think about the things, when you think about all the ways that you could change the world, where you can change someone's mind, or, you know, the way that someone feels, I mean, that's crucial. That's crucial. I mean, that's why I love arranging so much, is because this is a platform on which you can inherently take expectation and subvert it.
Totally.
Which creates an emotional response. Always. You know what I mean? Like there's no time that you expect something and get something else and don't feel something as a result of that, something powerful, like more powerful than you may have felt a second ago if you had gotten exactly what you expected, right? Because there's an element to variability and you know, unpredictability that is just, I don't know, it wakes you up a little bit. And I wanted that. I wanted to give that to other people. And the second moment it happened actually as I left sort of the college world, not quite, but, you know, when I was getting to the end of my college experience, I had written a last arrangement for my group, and we had unfortunately, we had lost one of our singers, had passed away. And we had just gotten the news. We got everyone together and we sang this arrangement that, you know, I had put together, and it took on an entirely new meaning. And I'm sure you guys have similar experiences that you can reference back to. You know, that struck me. It had nothing to do with me doing the arrangement and everything to do with what music can do. You know, the kinds of emotions that it can attach itself to, and how it can help people get through a time, and how it can bring them together when they feel alone. I mean, I've always said to anyone that will ask, I don't do this for music's sake. I don't actually consider myself a very good musician. I don't think I'm very good at music. What I love and what I'm passionate about, and what I think I have a little bit of a knack for, is reaching in and pulling out an emotion, or identifying an emotion, or seeing two different people and trying to put them together in a certain way, like in a world where they can live emotionally together. So it's all about emotion for me. You know, from the moment that I was wise enough to actually have a moment of self-introspection, I realized it wasn't going to be about the music. And it's a good thing too, because I kind of suck at music.
Well, I disagree with that. But I actually, it's funny that you say that you pull emotion out of people, because as you were talking, I was thinking back, you masterclass Trebs when we were seniors.
Yes.
And I remember
love that.
In that moment, like physically feeling you pull the emotion out of us, which is nuts. And not like,
that's incredible.
Now that you're saying this and saying your whole.
So now you have now you understand the motivation. That's why I'm there. That's why I love masterclassing so much, is because we're almost, music doesn't matter.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and I think that becomes like maybe not as cool of a moment as, you know, the like being dragged into a basement and learn to make Chopin moment, but it's like for me personally, I can speak that for me is like a watershed moment in music and understanding music. And I think most people don't really, or actually rather, collegiate acapella is often a tool for people to understand that emotion is almost more important than music, whereas it's not really about being cool or whatever, or having the coolest chord or whatever. It's only important in so much as it tells the story of whatever you're trying to get across in that moment.
Oh yeah. Yeah, music is just it's a tool. It's a communication tool. It's just a language, to say it simply. It's, you know, and different languages and different styles of music, or different languages have different, you know, they pull different things out of you. And that's why I do this. It's not because I'm attached to music per se. It's because music, just because of my background or because of whatever, my genetics, whatever the case may be, you know, that happens to be the language that I feel the most native to. So
something kind of, I think that ties in well to your arrangement style, because I know that you're busy and I'm sure you're arranging all the time, and the process differs slightly for every piece. But I think definitely like everything that we've heard you do, there's like, you know, the emotion just like comes off the page when you see the sheet music and
awesome
stuff. And
hey, that's the greatest compliment you can give me. That's all I'm looking for, man. And like definitely something, one of the few, I can't really pick up on
what makes what you do so good.
What makes that happen?
I know that one of the things is I love that you'll like really lean into motivic stuff, and that there's definitely a filmic quality into a lot of the arrangements that you do. What is like your general headspace when you're attacking a piece and how to deconstruct it and work on it?
Big question.
It's somewhat surreal to be analyzed musically like that. I don't feel like I deserve that level of attention. That's wonderful. So I'm sorry, I got really distracted. Your question was what is the thought process that goes
and what's
into
kind
that?
of just like if you have a blank slate, what's kind of your mindset going into that?
And I often have a blank slate. No, the great thing about arranging is that you really never start with a blank slate, right? You start with the things that are already there. So I have a couple of tricks that I use mentally to kind of jog myself, because obviously, like everyone else, I hit writer's block, and I hit, doing the same things over and over again, and I'm extremely judgmental of myself while I'm working, etc. So the first thing is, and I think there are a lot of people that make this, that have taught me the convention of this. That one of the names that comes to mind is Evan Feist. I remember him talking once about how he subverts expectation, how he will literally write out a line, and then, because it's the first thing that came to mind, and then he'll do the exact opposite of it. Just, it doesn't matter if it sounds good, sounds bad. It doesn't. The virtue of it is simply in forcing yourself into a place where you're unfamiliar territory, right? And I think that's super, super valuable. I mean, it's sort of like taking a piano piece and then switching the hands. It just feels like an entirely different piece. And the chances are, if you're virtuosic enough to pull that off, or work at it a little bit, you're going to create a new experience for your listener. So that's a big thing for me. When you start with an arrangement, a pop tune or what have you, you're never starting from square one. So resist that urge, resist the urge to think, all right, I have to make all this up from scratch. And this is, don't go fully transcriptive, please, goodness. But, give yourself the chance to operate off of the expectations that already exist in front of you. Okay. The musical conventions in the West are long established. Yeah. Right. So a dominant is going to head to a one. Like that's just, and the fact that there is such a thing as a deceptive cadence, and going to the 6 rather than the 1 is a testament to how at some point someone was like, this is important. Yeah. We need to divert expectations a little bit. So I think to answer that question simply, what the thought process is behind film kind of elements and motivic development is the stupidest, lamest answer, which is that it's all I knew, because I listened so much to film music, because I listened so much to Broadway musicals, things like Les Mis and Miss Saigon and all these kind of classics in the Broadway world. It kind of just established itself as a technique, something to draw from on your palette, you know what I mean? And so, and I kind of did it by accident. Is the answer to the question. With my first arrangement, I did it by accident. And then as I was looking back on the arrangement, I was thinking about what worked. That's a huge part of this process, is going back and try to figure out what worked. And you can do this too much. I just want to say that as an aside. You can go back and listen to your old work way too much. Please don't. You can do that so much. But it is so beneficial to look back at your old stuff and go, all right, why did this have the emotional effect that it did? And what I discovered was that people really like motivic development. I mean, this is not a new concept. Yeah. This is a concept that is taught in the textbooks, but you never really get it until you do it. At least in my case, I never really got it until I did it. And I realized that, establishing something very early on that comes back later in a changed way or a more full emotional capacity is essential, for me in terms of creating my musical language. So that's big. Yeah. That's big.
I was going to say, I'm sure that there's no one way again that this happens, but one of a thing that I've seen from you that I really like is you arranged stitches for Beyond Measure, I think.
Beyond Measure.
And I love that arrangement, and I think 90% of why I love it is because of that, like, get you out of my head, get you out. That's what makes it. And like you notice this with like the Dietzes and the Brahms and the Hughes of the world, that they're able to pull something from it feels like it's of the original, but it's not really. But you've kind of like taken it like exactly. Yeah. Do you have any like tips on like how you try to think about stuff like that, or is it just like, oh, this is something? That
totally. I mean, I don't know that they'll be very helpful, but I have some thoughts. One, just sing the thing over and over again. You know, as you're arranging, sing the solo line, because I'll tell you, man, like I told you, I have 5 or 6 little mental techniques to jog myself out of a writer's block or whatever. And one of the biggest ones is, you know, if you're stuck, go back to the solo. Go back to the solo line. You know, the arrangements that in contemporary acapella, I don't have much to say about like how acapella developed through barbershop and all that stuff. That's a world that I'd love to explore a little bit more, maybe when I have a little bit more time. But you know, and it's so important. You talk to the Deke Sharons of the world, and they're gonna have such a good grasp. The Ed Boyers of the world. These guys come from a much more educated place where they can reference like techniques that were used way back when. But when I walked into it, the sing off was just starting. I was learning from people like Tom Anderson. I was learning from people like Ben Bram, like the people that you just mentioned, whom I'm honored that you lumped me in with. Those guys were using techniques that were, because I guess at the time they were working mainly with smaller groups, and the really successful groups were smaller. You had the Boys to Men era, and then Pentatonics, wound up winning the sing off at some point and kind of taking the world by storm. And I think that's part of the reason, is because again, when you look back at why certain moments were emotional, just statistically speaking, more often than not, they used the solo to their advantage, whether it was combining the solo with a harmonic device, or, like making the solo line a part of the harmony, or taking the harmony lines and elevating them to the level of attention that you would give to a solo. I think a lot of arranging is about guiding a listener's attention. And it's funny, it's when it reminds me of that yet again, when you say things like the what makes the arrangement for Stitches work is that first part, but that first part is what came out the fastest and I spent the least time on. You know what I mean? And that's a testament to the fact that you're not always in control, and the fact that the listener's attention is what dictates how good the arrangement is. What are they listening to at a given moment? Because you can spend all day on this tiny little motif that no one's ever going to hear. They could if they tried and if they were really, really listening, but they probably would never, because they're so focused on get you out of my head. You know what I mean? Like that's huge. And to recognize that makes you a better arranger, because it makes you realize, all right, I've written a tapestry. It's gorgeous. I'm sitting here looking at it. Like, you have that feeling. It's like, oh, there's so much happening. And then you go back and you're like, when you find even yourself humming it later, you're humming a thing that you did, right? That's the whole arrangement to you. So, I have friends that refer to it as the core of an arrangement. It's something that they look forward to when they listen to it, something that they can hum back to themselves. So that's like sort of the more abstract way to talk about, that particular technique. But the practical way to talk about it is look to the solo. Look to the solo for your inspiration. And that's what I did with that particular moment. And the second thing for me, and this is not an original concept, but I find one that is severely underused, and that is syncopation. Syncopation, for anyone that doesn't know, being like, kind of like a subverting of the beat, basically, in a horribly non-academic way to describe that. It's, you got a straight rhythm, and then you take that off the rhythm. You know what I mean? You have people doing these polyrhythmic lines that create, a sense of pull or lean or groove. I can't tell you the number of professional arrangers that I respect and admire that's the first thing they think about. Hannah Giuliano was big on that. Hannah Giuliano she starts every time she starts talking about arranging, Hannah Giuliano references groove as the most important element that she looks for. And I think that's where I was heading with that. So look to the solo for your inspiration, syncopate what you can. Don't overuse words, but don't be afraid to use words, right? To create beats, to create groove. Because ultimately, words are what create the emotion. Yeah. At least 50%. Like, it's 50% words, 50% music. You know what I mean? Like, for me, in terms of, you can have emotional chords, right? Yeah. But you can also just have emotional words. And sometimes having no one sing and having the solo just say a couple words is incredibly impactful. You know what I mean? So you have to give words their due. You know, I'm not saying use them for every single syllable, because sometimes you're just going to distract from the solo. But if you have the opportunity to take words from the solo line that's inspired you to syncopate and get a groove going and get some nice chords going, some crunchy stuff happening, use words.
Yeah, totally. Since you do a lot of commission stuff, I know that you also do a lot of edits for things. Is there something that you've kind of learned about like your run-of-the-mill college or high school scholastic whatever chart that gets sent to you? Are there like a few things that come to mind of like things that could be improved easily in that sphere?
Yes, to answer that question, yes. I'm not trying to think of some of them. I think I have a general comment on that, which is, you know, not applicable to everyone, but in more cases than not, I think there's a tendency for less experienced arrangers to listen to other arrangements and copy. I can't imply that that's a bad thing, because clearly the best way to get good at what you want to be doing in terms of arrangements is to choose your role models and use their techniques, and really even transcribing their arrangements. I mean, that's one of the first things Tom Anderson had me do as an arranger, was listen to this thing and transcribe it right now, just drill it so that it gets into your bones. Their techniques, that's absolutely beneficial. But what I mean is when you're listening to, I don't know, best of college a cappella, I don't know, I'm going to pick a random like 2000. I have no idea what the year is, but when it's, you know, a couple of acapella has gone through stages. They've gone through phases where we've thought certain syllables were appropriate, and maybe now they're not so much. So I guess having your pulse on the on, you know, what's happening currently and what is affecting people emotionally right now is key, because it changes. It does. You know, when people hear Mozart nowadays, they don't feel the same thing as they felt when they first heard Mozart. You know, I think arranging and what you can do with it on a musical, from a musical standpoint, is analogous to what happens in society, just in general, right? You're dealing with context and contrast when you're arranging. You know, where have you come from? How are you, you know, creating contrast or like motion or whatever the case may be, you know, but it's all looked at in the context of what's happening now. So, you know, in Mozart's time, a certain thing was happening that made what he was doing extremely impactful. And I'm not saying it's not now, for, you know, there are people that, and I'm one of them, that love Mozart's work. It's just that, you know, the average listener right now is going to have a different emotional experience to that because of the context in which they're living. So as, you know, so collegiate arrangers, high school arrangers that are just getting started out, I would say listen all you can to what's happening now, as well as the things that you love from the past, or, you know, whatever the case may be, because the more knowledge, the better. You're not going to use certain syllables that'll make you seem kind of yesteryear. And by the way, that's not the only virtue of using contemporary syllables. Some of them are just better for recording. Some of them are better for emotional impact, or whatever the case may be. But listen all you can. Chris Harrison is known for, and I know you've had him on your show, he's known for saying, you know, whenever he's not making something, he's listening to something. And that's his secret. I mean, it's not so much of a secret, but like it's how he's as amazing as he is. Sorry, Chris. No, Chris, and he's amazing at what he does. And that's, I believe, part of the reason is because he's such an open mind for all different types of music, contemporary, old, it doesn't matter. So I think that's huge. In terms of like actual techniques for arranging, like there's all the simple stuff, but it's no different that I would tell any starting arranger. It's, you know, don't put your basses too close together below the staff. You know, there are voicing techniques that you can use when you want a powerful chord to hit home. Try to use fifths, fourths, nice, you know, thirds where they belong in the voicing. Utilize different voicings, because not everything has to be in root position. And then obviously words are nice. There's no need to make an arrangement entirely syllabic in terms of acasyllabic. Oh, no, I can't believe I said that. But yeah, you know, just the things that you pick up as you go and that have to be learned by experience. But, you know, I haven't personally received too many edits that have made me go, oh, goodness. I will say this, because I am such a stickler. Formatting. Please format. Or learn how to format. There are many online resources that you can use to format a simple vocal score. And if you can't, put out my email or something and have them email me, because I want to help with this, because it's huge. That's honestly, if I get an arrangement back more often than not to edit, more often than not, I spend 2 hours just formatting the thing correctly, and then I can start to do musical work. And this is not, so that I can be less inconvenienced. This is not about my convenience. It's about your singers. When they're reading the page, what's going to help them the most, to get the most out of the music, because everyone wants to kind of traverse the step between looking at the sheet music and loving what they're singing. Right. Help them do that.
Yeah, totally.
So
I feel like we can have a whole nother episode like strictly on like the technical side.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And maybe we can have that eventually and have you back on. So actually, unfortunately, we're nearing the end of, we're ending right now. We're nearing the end of our episode for today.
Okay.
So you get to answer the 2 magical questions that we ask both of our guests. They're not magical. I'm not sure why I said that. But the first one is, what sort of trends do you see in acapella that you're excited by?
I see in acapella right now. Well, I'm quite immersed in the production world right now. So, not being part of the scholastic environment in terms of being a singer, is a little bit of a damper in terms of like what I kind of know. Like my finger is on the pulse of what's happening in production, and what's happening in production is kind of crazy. Bill Hare is retiring apparently. Nuts. He just posted, which is insane. And TVC's got a big CEO change happening right now. There's different directions in terms of like what kinds of albums are going to be made. I think people are focusing a lot more on creating original sounding content as opposed to doing yearbook albums, which is huge, which I've always wanted, and I'm really, really excited about. And I want to encourage anyone listening to do that, because there's a big wide world out there that can benefit from hearing your creative musical voice and not just your physical voice.
I don't know if people have been listening for this whole episode. I don't know. They might know, but can you just quickly explain what a yearbook album is?
Yeah, sorry. So a yearbook album is a term that I've used and I've heard used to describe a recording album, right? Like a recorded album that a group is putting together simply for the sake of documenting their solos or particular songs or arrangements that they've liked performing throughout the year. The result of that is that it's not that there's no musical virtue to that. It's just that what typically happens is previous albums have similar songs, if songs are in rotation. So a lot of Ivy League groups will do this from Ivy League schools that are kind of longstanding and have traditional songs. They'll have the same, 4 or 5 songs that have gotten a new solo, right? They'll have that recorded again and again and again and kind of document the process of a new song just for the sake of having their voice on the album and for expressing it in their own unique way. So what's happening now is that because of, there are certain groups that are sort of leading the charge in terms of kind of blowing people out of the water with their creativity and, with their willingness to work with professionals, both producers and arrangers and masterclass people. They're pushing the envelope and they're rearranging songs and they're restructuring things and subverting expectation like we've been talking about. And those groups are getting a lot more popular. And therefore, I think the demand is kind of going up for that kind of music. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully being a part of, that journey for as many groups as possible.
That's a great segue to our last question, being what is next on the agenda for J5?
For J5, for me, so I'm in a whirlwind of many activities right now. I've worked on a couple of films. I'm working as a score producer at an independent film studio up in upstate New York.
Awesome. And
I've scored a couple of things. I'm working on documentaries and all that stuff. And then on the side, I'm working at a studio. So there's a studio up in Rhinebeck, New York. I told you I'm awesome with geography. Rhinebeck, New York, called Clubhouse, which is fairly popular for, the Lumineers recorded there. Shawn Mendes recorded his last album there. Illuminate, I think that's still his last album. And so I've been working up at that studio doing some production stuff. And so it's sort of back and forth there while at the same time doing arrangements. I think it's ICCA season right now. So I'm hitting up quite a few arrangements. right now. And then, you know, I'm also doing stuff with people that are creating content for YouTube. I'm creating a couple of EPs for upcoming artists that I'm just sort of producing from the ground up. So that's my personal thing. What I would love to see myself get into more in specifically in a cappella would be I want people to take the advantage of lots of us can write original music, and I would love to get some commissions for original songs for a cappella groups. And forget commissions, forget money. I just want to write original stuff, and I want to see people writing original stuff.
Yeah.
And this is officially what I'm telling people that are, you know, creating new groups, and they come to me and ask me, you know, if they think that, you know, my advice is useful to them. They'll ask me what I would like to see from them, and I tell them, original music, please. Original music. Please. It can only help. It can only help. I mean, if you're asking me, I want to see some original stuff. I think that keg has yet to be tapped. Yeah, I really do. I mean, it's not like people aren't doing it. They are absolutely doing it. Right. I want to see it come up in popularity. I want to see it more frequent. I think that's a common request from us guys that are working in the biz.
You and Hannah both.
Oh yeah, totally. She's all about that too, right?
Well, thank you if you've listened for this whole episode and made it with us the whole way. I think it was super interesting. Got to peel back the curtain on the enigmatic Johnny DelToro for a little bit. Thank you for joining us today, Johnny.
Absolutely.
It was a real pleasure.
This is a pleasure.
I'm sure there'll be another one down the line.
Please, yeah, anytime. I mean,
any time of
hit
day.
Me over the head. Hit me over the head
7
with something. You know, you just gotta like reel me in, okay?
But we hope you join us next week for a new episode of Head Voice.
Do it.
Without you.